There has been a great deal of discussion recently, and I don't even want to say discussion. We could add some other things. We could say discussion, dialogue, riots, protests, you name it, regarding the role of Confederate monuments in our society and what that should look like today. And I'm bringing it up for several reasons, and you might say, well, why is she bringing that up in art class? Because they are sculptures. And we have been recently talking about, in the first unit, we talked about some of the purposes of art in our society and what that is. And I want to bring that up and talk to you in a little bit more depth about that because I'm hearing some people discuss purposes incorrectly. And I want to clarify that. First off, I also want you to know that this is not a new discussion. The Confederate monuments, for the large part that we're talking about, were put up quite a while after the Civil War. They were not put up immediately on right after the Civil War. Most of them were put up anywhere from 40 to 50 to 60 plus years later. And they were put up during Jim Crow segregationist era laws when I've actually read city ordinances that say that this monument is going to be put here so that people will always remember their place in this community. And literally, that's what they are saying, that Black people will know where they belong. And they're putting this monument up to remind them where they belong in the society. So don't think this is brand new. This has been ongoing for years and years. When some of these monuments went up, when they were putting them up, people were protesting. People were writing editorials against it happening. This is not new. I just want to point that out to you. When we were talking about some of the roles of art in society, two of them that we brought up were one was to record and one was to commemorate. Now, if we are going to look at art that records, that is art that dictates evidence, and in this case it would be visual evidence of the representation or likeness of an individual. So with that said, this is a good example of that. You're looking at Nathan Bedford Forrest, Confederate general, and he probably looked a lot like this. I would not say this is a monument to him. I would not say this commemorates him. I would say this provides a likeness of him. Now, let's look at something that would be considered more commemorative. This is a commemorative sculpture that was created of Nathan Bedford Forrest. It was put up in 1904 in Memphis City Park, and it was literally put up there. Literally, the ordinance when they put it up said, exactly what I said earlier, that it was put here so that everybody would remember where they belonged. And this, on the other hand, is commemorative, right? This is done to glorify, to make him look great. It's the sculpture itself is it's a really old school type of sculpture. It's called an equestrian monument. And equestrian monuments were rulers placed on a horse because, in battle, generals get to ride horses, infantry do not get to do that. And having a horse and being placed on a horse just shows this kind of place of authority, leadership, honor. And so the whole statue does that. I wanted to point out how he looks, right? Just even the look of him is very much a leader. And here you can see this is an early photograph of the sculpture. And you can see it's not even just the sculpture itself, it's how it's placed, that it's placed within a city park. It's placed with benches so that you can sit and stare and look at it and gaze at it, right? So it's more than just a likeness of him. This is commemorative of him, right? A commemorative monument. That a monument means that it's a statue that's created, or it could be another type of structure too, like a building or something, to commemorate a famous or notable person or event. Commemorative means to recall by showing respect and honor. So when we say commemorative monuments, we are talking about showing respect and honor to these people. Nathan Bedford Forrest was, I will be honest, I'm a little bit of a Civil War buff, and he was quite a military genius. He started doing some things during the Civil War that I think really did keep the Confederacy going when maybe they would not have normally without his kind of leadership. But I would say he was an early terrorist, if you want to know the truth. He would grab a few guys, he'd ride out into the night, he'd ride into a camp of sleeping Union soldiers, slaughter them all while they slept, ride out. He would terrorize people if there was some Union sympathizer farmers. He'd go in, ride in the middle of the night, kill them all, get out. I mean, he did a lot of that. He also did major battles as well, and led troops into them. One of the most notorious things that he did was that he attacked uh, a fort. It was called Fort Pillow. Uh, it was being occupied by Union soldiers. A large majority of these were African Americans who had escaped slavery, gone to the North, became soldiers, and came back to the South to fight. That's a whole nother story of bravery I can't even talk about right at this moment. But uh, that'd be for another day. But just to point that out to you, and they were occupying this fort. Uh, they were Nathan Bedford Forrest finding out that a lot of African American Union soldiers were there. Uh, was very, intent on taking it over. So he got a bunch of troops. They went in, they surrounded it, they took it over, and then they ended up slaughtering them. And I don't even want to exactly go into it, but a lot of the soldiers that were there that day, and I'm talking Confederate soldiers, not even Union soldiers, talked about the horrible acts of atrocity that occurred, and especially to the black soldiers, where they were crucified, they were lit on fire. It just goes on and on. So my point in this is that, yeah, war is bad, but he was particularly bad. When the war was over, uh, he wasn't quite done, and so he helped establish a new group, which you might have heard of, called the Ku Klux Klan. He was the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. So even after the war, he continued on and did things like voter suppression through violence and intimidation and, you know, lynchings and so forth that go on with it. It is said that at the end of his life, he had a, come to Jesus moment, I guess, and repented for a lot of the things that he did, and said that the Ku Klux Klan should disband and change their ways. But it was set, and he'd put something into motion that still has lingering effects today. So I just want to point out this is what we're talking about, and so there is a difference, and you can see this is an old picture. This is not a new picture of anything that's been happening recently, and then we also have the opposite side of this. So this has been very, very controversial, and I want you to think about that. Eventually, this was a sculpture in the middle of the park in Memphis, as I had said, and the only way that this could be taken down was because of state laws and city ordinances and all those things to keep them into place so that everyone knew their place, was they actually sold the city park to another. The city council sold the park to a private entity. That private entity had it removed. They took it, I believe I'm not sure, it's gone to another group who, I think the thing for these is not in necessarily a place of honor, but put them in a museum. I hear people say, oh, it records history. And I think, but wait a minute. Whenever I ask somebody, like I show them a sculpture, I say, who is that? They go, I don't know. Well, I don't think it's recording history. If you don't even know who it is, you can't even tell me what they did. That's not the case. It's not recording history, it's commemorative. Two very, very different things. Honoring something and recording events are two totally different things. I don't have any problem with us remembering events that happened. I'm a Civil War buff, obviously. I think that's important. But I also think commemorating, commemorizing and glorifying things uh, really needs to be considered and thought out. Right now, they're having a discussion in Tennessee about whether this portrait bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest should remain in the Capitol. So that's going on right now. The one of the largest monuments to a Confederate general, Robert E. Lee, is being taken down as we speak. So I want you to think about these things. And this week, it's kind of a, like I said, a hot topic. But this week in our forum, I want you to think about this. You can definitely in this forum, without any sort of repercussion, truly believe that Confederate monuments should remain. I think you can tell by my discussion, I have really strong feelings about that. But have good, solid reasons why that should be the case. One of which cannot be to record history. They do not record history. Uh, they are propaganda. They're there to glorify events, and they're not there to record. So I'm always like, it is okay to have your opinions, but it can't be that one because that just is not the case in this situation. We discussed the difference between recording history and commemorative sculpture. Two very different things. So you're going to be asked to do that this week. I'm going to go ahead and post a few very current things that are happening from the last week or two, and I'd like you to look through those and then add to the forum this week. Okay. I will talk to you soon.